Hello, welcome to 8.9 News. I'm Finlo Costain. Today's headlines: UK renewables deployment is being held back by grid connection capacity. A regenerative farming expert says that shepherding must be part of the ecological restoration of the uplands. And the Minecraft spin-off Rivercraft 2 targets flood risk, climate change and biodiversity. Sheep are back in the spotlight following controversy over the future of grazing in sensitive upland areas. But sheep have grazed Britain's hillsides for millennia. I asked Caroline Grindrod from Roots of Nature why that selective way that sheep graze is now coming under fire.
Well, it's absolutely true that sheep have been around a very long time, and they're a really important part of our cultural heritage, and particularly in places like where I live in the uplands in the Lake District. But they are very selective grazers, so they have small mouth parts. They are known to sort of seek out particularly nutritious and palatable plants. So if they're left unregulated and they're not part of an actively shepherded system, then they do have a habit of overgrazing the species until they've disappeared from the sward.
But surely, Caroline, they've always been selective. Sheep have always been selective.
They've always been selective, but they've either in their own native ecology, they would be predated. So predators would be managing that grazing behavior. And in our system in the UK, they would have been shepherded. So in the times of old, up in the uplands, shepherds would be actively managing that area to make sure they weren't overgrazing any particular areas. They'd be allowing rest and recovery, and there'd be fewer sheep. So there would be more cattle, more ponies that would help take the pressure off any one particular species. And this was an organic system as well. You've got to remember there was no chemicals and interventions in those days. So they weren't damaging the ecology with insecticides and wormers and things like that.
So is it possible to herd sheep on the hills today in a regenerative manner?
Sheep can absolutely be part of a regenerative system. The challenge is, and we teach this at grazing school, they can be a very effective regenerative tool if you can manage the timing and application of their grazing, and you can allow them the pasture to recover between grazings. The challenges on the hills is that is very difficult to do because there isn't the fencing infrastructure up there, and often the hills are parts of commons where there's lots of shared grazings. So getting people to collaborate around when everything is cleared so that you can allow proper rest and recovery is almost impossible. So that's a big challenge, but they absolutely, as part of a more controlled system, they can be rotated and they can be part of a regenerative system.
So by and large, do you need to be managing sheep in rotation with cattle? Does it mean that we need to perhaps think of farming, sheep in the lowlands much more than we do on the hills, and perhaps the cattle more in the uplands?
So in a common situation, that's going to be much more challenging. But that is one of the ways that we've been trying to tackle this issue with our wilderculture project is we've got a couple of examples where we have done exactly that. We've taken the sheep off the hill ground where there's less fencing and we're not able to control the timing. And we've moved cows and ponies up onto those areas. Again, they're less selective and we've allowed for time off and rest and recovery. And then the sheep are being used in a rotation in the lower areas. And we found that the hill breeds do very well in that tall grass grazing system. So that has been one of the ways that we've been tackling it.
Now, clearly, there's a conflict emerging between shepherds and places like national parks. What do you think the best way is to avoid these conflicts going forward?
I would love to see a way of finding a way of keeping our heritage and cultural sort of importance of sheep. But I would love to be able to sort of teach regenerative principles to shepherds. And then these are people who are incredibly skilled, knowledgeable, and committed. I want them to help us come up with ways of doing this. We need their brains on this problem. Because ultimately what's happened is that because we're not able to come up with these solutions of how do we rest and recover and how do we collaborate across large common areas, it's left conservationists who want to recover the ecology, because there's no question it's been degraded by just set stock sheep grazing with no control. It's left them with just the blunt instrument of either removing sheep or reducing the numbers to a point where it's just completely unprofitable. So, I would love to see some way of re-establishing shepherding or fencing areas and rotating and resting, and whole, groups of commoners coming together to try and work out ingenious ways of applying the tools of regeneration to see, some of these old skills come back to life.
It seems like there is a very polarized debate, as there are in many aspects of land use. And what's needed is compromise. What's needed is for both sides, if sides exist, to sort of realize that there is a bit of truth in what the other is saying, and to be able to have a conversation about it without feeling immediately threatened.
Absolutely. It's going to take everybody sitting down together, working on, you know, what are the potential solutions, and people can be really ingenious. Let's give these shepherds, these farmers, the chance to evolve and, you know, become part of the solution.
Well, that was Caroline Grindrod from Roots of Nature. More about this and our other headline news on our website, 8.9.com. That's all for now. We're back on Friday. Thanks for watching.